Hey, alright, so this last video on Project 4 is going to be about how I assembled my final mix session, right? So basically what I did is I took all my tracks, every single session that I made, so there's like a music session, there's a session for all the big sound effects and transition sounds, and then there's a session for all the different gameplay sounds, right? I took all those things and rendered them out as full stems and brought them into this final session with the video. And blended them all together. So you can see I have a couple layers of like, these should all be the game sound effects, right? You can see these are all the different sound effects. Oh, there's all the gameplay ones down here. Yep, so these are all the sound effects. I just had big general levels set for all of them, right? Because I did most of my mixing in another, sorry, that's my laundry machine being pissed. I mixed majority of these sounds into another, in the other sessions as I was making them. And so now I can just drag and drop them in. They're all pretty normalized at this point. And yeah, so here they all are, they're labeled. And then what I do is I run them all into the individual group auxiliary channels or submixes. So there's one for sound effects, there's one for music, there's one for VO. This trailer didn't have any VO. I still made it just so that if there is VO later, I can just drag and drop it into my final mix session and my mix is already done, right? The really kind of interesting thing is that when we have all these sound effects happening together, right? I put Soothe on there to kind of catch a lot of the nonsense that's happening and things that so I can smooth it out, basically. It's just catching the sort of peak frequency resonances that are happening and removes them to make things sound more tame. I have it set pretty subtly, and then I've also gone ahead and removed some high-end because there was a lot of high-end happening once I got it together and started mastering it. I was like, wow, the sound effects have way too much high-end, so let's pull some of it out. It conflicts with a lot of the cymbals and things happening in the music. And then on the music, which we have here, you'll see I drew a little bit of volume animation or automation so that when these big animations are happening, the music is ducking down to almost nothing before popping back up. So you can hear what that sounds like. Right, nice and fun. The other thing I do is I duck the music down by about 2 dB when we're doing that big final splash animation, before it comes back up, The interesting part about how I mixed these, and once everything is going and routed to the different submixes, the music actually has this plugin called Track Spacer on it, which is a very nifty, very helpful plugin that basically you can have it listen to any sort of channel or audio file or whatever, anything that you route to it, and it will dip down things in a certain frequency by how you set it, right? So I have it set so that the music will lose some of its, like when a sound effect comes in and starts playing, because I have everything from the entire sound effects submix routed to this, you'll see whenever sound effects start happening, the music will be pushed down and only the specific frequencies where those sound effects are happening, because that way everything's a lot more smooth. I don't have to worry about conflicting things, right? If I have a whoosh that's very high end, it'll duck down some of the high end in the tune, so you won't lose the volume and the strength of the tune, but you will have less conflicting frequencies. And so if I hit play, you'll see what this looks like. I only did it with the big major sound effects, but whatever. So you barely hear it making a difference, right? Because the music is still just as driving, but when you get to the point that you're mastering stuff, there is way less problem areas, I would say. because instead of having to try to balance the high end of two specific things, you're really only doing it for one at a time because you have this plugin on. So it's very helpful. I highly recommend getting Trackspacer if you can. It's also really good for if you have a bass and a kick. You can make it remove only things sub, 100 hertz whenever the kick happens. So you don't lose the strength in your bass, only the low end down for a second while the kick is happening, right? It's got a lot of really good functions, and I recommend it. And then lastly, I have my mastering chain. The mastering chain is really just soothe to catch, again, any sort of frequencies that are piled up on top of each other. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so I made print tracks out of those individual group stems so that way, or submixes, so that way I didn't have to. I can just print those out and they're good and they're done forever. I never have to go back to the session if I don't want to. Okay. And it printed my Trackspacer and Soothe edits onto those final mix buses, right? So that way when I do my actual mastering, it has all these effects already printed on them. Less CPU usage. If you ever need to go back and remaster it, you don't have to worry about a plugin not working or something like that. It's all just printed onto the track. And so for the final one, you can see Soothe is just cleaning up a few little things. And then my mastering chain basically goes EQ, multi-band compression to compress the low, mids, high mids, and highs separately. So that way, like, if I have a super crazy low-end thing happen, it doesn't suck up all the bandwidth of the limiter, right? It just is tamed here. This impact thing just sort of like makes sure that none of the transients are totally lost. Imager is just adding a little bit of stereoizing through the low mids, high mids, and highs. Kind of see, just makes a wider stereo image. Clarify and Stabilizer, those things are both just, they're like kind of catch-all things that I barely use Clarify. It just adds a little bit of high end where it's necessary, where it's missing. Stabilizer just adds little bumps of frequency when it feels they're missing, or removes them when they feel there's too much. Then I've got a dynamic EQ catching a lot of things here, you can see. It's doing things similar to Soothe, where it's just catching these big groups where I know there will be a lot of sounds happening at some point, And then lastly, I just have my limiter right at the end, or maximizer. It's just kind of catching peaks and making sure things are hovering around the right level. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. The reason I route these to a separate OGS track and then do my mastering on that is so that then I can print out my final edit of everything being done. And so if I need it, I have it right here. It is all rendered. Once I export this, I just, when I'm done with it, I go to, export audio to movie, which this is in Logic. Everyone has some different form of like bounce to movie or bounce to whatever. And then I just bounce it out with that, with everything else muted. This is here so that if the session goes to hell, 10 years from now, I still have a printed final copy of the audio as well as the video for my website. But yeah, that's about it. That's how you do the final mix and master for your trailer. That's how I did it anyway. I think it's, the most professional way to go about it, and just the way to save your butt the most if you ever need to go back to this in a couple of years. So yeah, that's it for this one, and can't wait to see all your trailers and see how they sound. Take it easy.